Hello and welcome to Live at 5. I am your host, Anita Vogel. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. It is great to have you with us. Tonight on Live at 5, we are talking about a very important topic, corporate security. You know, in the last 2 years, not a lot of people have been going into the office. We're finally at a time now, post-pandemic, hopefully post-pandemic, when people will be going back into the office. And we want to ask, what challenges does that present? What challenges do employers have to be prepared for? And we're going to tackle all those subjects tonight. A little bit of background about myself. I have a background in television news. I've worked at stations all over the country, and for the last 20 years for the Fox News Channel, mostly in Los Angeles, both as a full-time employee and a part-time employee. All right, now let's meet our esteemed panel. First, we have Stephen Bernard. Stephen is former Executive Vice President of Sony Pictures Entertainment. Then we have Brad Brecky. He is former head of the FBI's Office of Private Sector, engaging with America's corporations for the FBI. We have Florence Chung, expert in public safety, stakeholder engagement. Matt Horace, Chief Security Officer for Mayo Clinic. And last but not least, Jim McDonnell, Sheriff of Los Angeles County, retired. Welcome, panel, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Anita.
It is great to have you here. So what I want to do is I want to give each of you a very quick opportunity to introduce yourself to the audience. Let's take 30 seconds each. Just tell us who you are and what you do. Stephen, we'll start with you.
Thank you. I'm Steve Bernard, and currently I have my own business. I guess I've had it for 4 years after I retired from Sony Pictures. And before that, I was in high-tech, energy, food, military, and police. So how's that for 30 seconds?
That's pretty good. That was very good. All right. Now, Brad Brecky, go ahead.
Thank you, Anita. 35 years of experience in the security industry, served with the FBI, and also was Chief Security Officer for Target Corporation for a number of years, taking care of a safe shopping environment for the 300,000 team members and 1 billion guest contacts each year. Good to be with you here tonight. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I have always felt safe shopping at Target. I would just like to let you know that. Okay. Next up, we have Florence Chung. Florence?
Hi, Anita.
Hi.
Florence Chung. I run a consulting company called the Hetty Group. We're focused on developing stakeholder engagement strategies, working with law enforcement, nonprofits, and the corporate and business community, specifically to help create safer organizations and cities. I've worked alongside law enforcement, been public safety adjacent for about 20 years now.
Excellent. Okay, Matt Horace, you're up next.
Good evening, Anita. Matt Horace, Chief Security Officer of the Mayo Clinic. This is my third corporate position after leaving the federal government as a senior executive service leader at the ATF. So glad to be here tonight.
Wow. Okay. Interesting background. Thank you. And Jim McDonnell.
No, thank you, Anita. I spent about the last 40 years in the public safety business, 29 years with the Los Angeles Police Department, left there as first assistant chief. I became chief of police in the city of Long Beach, California, and then became sheriff of Los Angeles County, where I served for 4 years, and retiring there and then moving on to begin my own consulting group, McDonnell Strategies Group. So excited to be here tonight. Thank you for having me and look forward to our discussion.
Let's get it on. Okay, great, guys. My first question is, and I want to throw this to Matt. Mayo Clinic, thousands, tens of thousands of employees. What are some of the biggest challenges you're expecting for companies across the country as people come back to the workplace?
Well, thank you. You know, the biggest challenge we all face is the unknown. And we always like to say that we can't secure what we don't know. In many cases now, businesses that once had hundreds, if not thousands of employees in their physical space have downsized at the impact of hybrid and remote work. There are just less people in this space. There are less people in parking lots. There are less people in buildings. There are less people in the environment. We have less eyes. The critical mass is significantly diminished.
Yeah, it is a very different workplace now, and that is certainly going to be one of the challenges. I also want to ask, what are some of the changes that employees will see as they come back into the workplace? And who would like to answer that? I'm just going to throw it out there.
Anita, I'll take a shot at that.
Okay.
A number of things are happening, sort of to build on Matt's theme of uncertainty. In some cases, people have not been in a facility for 2 years. Some people have been hired and never even been in the building.
That's
So
true.
there's efforts underway to almost socialize returning to work, almost practice runs to get people familiar with it. There's also a much greater focus on health measures so that they're taking steps, precautions to ensure that good health is maintained. An example from my past at Target, when the bird flu was out, there was concerns about contamination, and we actually put out the wipes you see at the carts that you can pull off tissues to wipe them off, and that's where that began. And you'll see a lot more of that going forward as people try to adjust to the new risks.
Yeah, all kinds of new tools to help people feel safe. And then this question too, because, you raise a good point about how, people are coming back into the office. Some of them are new employees. They've never been at their desk. They've never met other employees face to face. Steve, let me ask you, what kind of a challenge does that present in a workplace?
I think we have to walk softly as it relates to that, because people really don't know each other. Even your boss, maybe you never met personally. You've done everything by Zoom or Zoom Air or whatever they call it. But I think also, there's going to be not only a level of anxiety and uncertainty and fear and concern. What is the new normal? We don't know. It's still not defined. And hybrid work models, 3 days a week, off on Monday and Friday, Saturday, Sunday, of course. We're going to see a mixture of that. And there's going to be some experimenting with it. And maybe you don't have the office that you used to have. Maybe you have a plug and play desk. But the other thing that's happening is a real pushback from a lot of people. And, we saw it in the Great Resignation. We're still seeing it. And that is, I don't want to go back to the workplace. Mm-hmm. So what do you do about that? And is it possible that working remotely becomes permanent? Maybe in some instances it is. If you're in manufacturing or service industry, probably not. Mm-hmm. But I think we've got to be more reasonable about it. And if we're not, the competition will be.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What I want to do now, because you mentioned such a good point that this creates a lot of anxiety for people. It's almost like a new territory, uncharted territory for certain people. And, we've seen examples in the past 2 years about the ramifications of that. So I want to go to a video right now. We've all heard about these incidents over the past couple of years with people on planes just losing it, right? Whether they don't want to wear the mask or they're just have pent-up frustrations from all of the COVID restrictions. And they've really taken it out on flight attendants who have gotten hurt. So let's go ahead and look at this video and then we'll discuss it on the other side.
It's life back in the sky.
If we don't stand up, it's only going to get worse.
Unruly passengers. Bizarre incidents. All taking place inside planes. As America opens up and millions start flying again, some on board are acting up.
Don't you dare touch a flight attendant like this.
This flight attendant punched, losing some teeth after this encounter with a passenger. Fueling much of the anger and complaints, the mask rule. They're still mandatory here because of tight spaces and uncertainty over who's been vaccinated for coronavirus.
We are seeing unruly passenger events at a rate of 60 times the normal number of events in a year.
Yeah, we need to get his legs pushed to the back.
Okay, wow. I mean, that is scary, but that's been happening. So many incidents that I've seen on the news. Passengers are just, they got to get used to the rules of flying again, I guess. And Florence, let me go to you first. What tips could you offer to tamp down tempers and bring people to a little bit more sense of calm?
Yeah, I think just watching that video, I think it's just another indicator of how on edge people are and how volatile our society has become in the last few years. We've heard those stories of people getting in unhinged and there's just a lot more anxiety and depression and hostility out there, and high crime. We know that crime is on the rise. And so all those elements may be brought into the workplace. So I think one of the things that we need to think about is how do we pay more attention to security planning as employees go think about going back into the office. They're thinking about, is it going to be safe? And as executives leading organizations, they will have to start thinking about placing a priority on security planning that they might not have placed a priority on before. But it's incidents like this that you saw with the airlines, but just everywhere, in stores, in just on trains, on subways. I think people just need to understand that that's the society we're living in right now. So how do we become aware of our own surroundings? Head on a swivel.
Mhm.
Yeah, so Florence, that's a great point for security officers out there with different corporations. They really have to think ahead and plan for this because nobody really knows exactly how this is going to go when people walk back in that door. And Jim, Florence mentioned that this kind of behavior breeds crime. And
Yes.
Certainly I saw some crimes on that video, those people, attacking flight attendants. So knowing that this uncertainty and this anxiety could cause crime, what solutions do you offer companies as they consider that?
I think the big thing is relationships, is getting, for any corporation or any resident really of any community, getting to know the police who patrol your community, getting to know the supervision and the management if you have the ability to be able to do that. And so that when you call for something, it's not a call from an unknown person. It's somebody you already have a relationship with. And you always find that no matter where that is the case, you get a lot more done. You think about where we are today, though, and this truly is a different society that we're living in today than it was just 2 years ago. And you think what we've been through, the pandemic, the number of changes in society that are probably unprecedented, the polarization politically that we've seen across the country, and now the crisis created by Russia and the Ukraine, and what that impact that's going to have around the world. The breakdown, as some would say, in the rule of law across the nation. We've seen smash and grabs, we've seen unrest, random acts of violence, and cyber threats. So no matter what front you're looking at, we have all a heightened sense of tension, a heightened sense of stress on everybody, and that's going to demonstrate itself in ways that are unpredictable. So I think Florence said, head on a swivel. Be aware, situational awareness. Be aware of your surroundings. When you go into a room or a movie theater or wherever it is, know where the exits are. My kids laugh at me because I'm always giving them small flashlights. If you don't have a light and the power goes out, you're trapped. You can't get out of there. And so just have something like that. And it's just not being paranoid, but thinking a step ahead, doing the what ifs.
Just a quick comment on that, Anita. I think there's one more aspect to it.
Sure.
It wasn't that long ago we worried about mental illness, right? And what the workplace or the employer could do about it. Today, we need to worry about mental health.
Mm-hmm.
And mental health is a crisis right now. A lot of people are not coping. They don't know how to cope. They don't know who to talk to. They don't know who they can trust. And I think the employers have got to change and create an open mic, if you will, so that people can actually say, here's what's on my mind. Here's what I'm worried about. Can you help me? Without fear of retribution or being terminated. And I think that security, where you have corporate security and HR, have to have very frequent conversations about what's going on with individuals and create that duty of care in the workplace.
Yeah, that is a great point. And I wanted to just sneak Matt in quickly before we go to the break on that, because Stephen is right. People coming back to the workplace have new health issues and different health issues than they had before, and mental health being one of them. And so, Matt, how do organizations, and you're part of a big health organization, but how do organizations take that into consideration, and what should they do?
Well, I think you have to further codify your security plans, number one, and recognize that the people who visit your environment, those outsiders, we've seen through the data and the science over the past 18 to 20 months, assaults and workplace violence incidents have gone up. And why is that? More people following more rules, more procedures, more of the time, make for an unpredictable environment. So your security plans need to be in place, and you need to collaborate, like Jim said, with HR and legal and the other entities. But what you saw on airlines is only a fraction of what's happening out in the real world at Class A buildings and healthcare environments and transportation and others.
Yeah, no, there's a lot going on out there for sure. All right, great discussion, guys, so far. We are going to go to a break, and then we're going to come back on the other side. Stay with us.
All right, number 1, 8. Very good. Excellent. 2.
This is a code red lockdown.
In the United States, there are an average of 2 mass shootings per day. How do you protect your children?
Back against the wall. Back against the wall. It's going to be okay. We're safe. We're safe.
Keep those around you safe and protected.
And we're back. So the spot you just saw before everyone's lovely picture was an example of how you can literally take bookshelves in a classroom and turn them into shields, and also use offices as safe spaces. Now, this is from a company called Protect Ed, and they give great examples of, you know, how you can use everyday things in the classroom to protect yourself. And Jim, I know you're involved in this, so why don't you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I'm familiar with the company. That's a group of people came together, some of them tier 1 special operators from the military, and they saw what was happening all too often in American society, particularly in schools and other workplace violence incidents. And they tried to come up with something that could be used regardless of the setting, to be able to, in a very short order, provide a safe place for people to hide while they wait for first responders to arrive. And they came up with this, and that bookshelf that was pictured there has ballistic backing in it that can stop penetration from the typical bullets that you would see in these types of shootings. And so, while not a panacea, certainly is one more tool in the toolbox to be able to help keep our kids safe, but keep our workplaces safe as well. And the idea being that there are things in the workplace that we can use, but we have to think ahead and be able to prepare ourselves, whether it's this or no matter what it is. There are ways to be able to deal with whatever comes up. But generally, you don't have time in the moment to be able to formulate that plan. You have to think ahead and be able to respond very quickly when something like this does happen. There's a lot at stake.
Yeah, that was a classroom setting, but I imagine employers have to think about what they have in their setting to help keep themselves safe. Florence, do you have any tips about that for companies, depending upon what kind of a company it might be?
Yeah, some of the things that I've seen companies do is, some companies are actually closing their offices early so that their employees can get home, before dark. Or hiring private security officers to walk people to their cars or to walk them to public transportation hubs. Then this is a little bit more costly. But for any executive watching, I think you can expect to have to start making safety and security a priority. And if you don't have these security plans in place now, you'll have to start thinking about how to address these risks in the workplace. But that's some of the things I've seen. I mean, in Seattle, many of these smaller tech companies have been moving out of the offices, out of downtown, because there's been a rise in crime. And so, employees can expect a lot of different changes if and when they go back to the office.
Yeah, and of course, the idea is to bring people back to the office. I imagine employers want their employees to come back in and to feel safe. I mean, so a lot of this is sort of a psychological thing. It's a psychological feeling that employees, part of the reason they would want to come back is to feel safe. Brad, would you say that's true?
Yes, Anita, I think that is part of the planning process here. Whether you're a large organization or small, I think it is best to be assessing the risks, what they might be, and then look at your resources, and probably most importantly, communicate to your staff, to the guest, those coming into your space, what you're doing about it. More than ever, a two-way communication with social media or other forums to try to create a culture of safeness, not just certain steps or procedures, but they understand that this is the safe environment that the organization has invested in them and is looking out for them. You know, Stephen mentioned mental health. I've seen some corporations actually expand their mental health benefits. So it's beyond just addressing the immediate need, but trying to expand that scope, which gives, again, to your point, people a sense that the company is looking out for you.
Well, Brad, you mentioned, being safe and feeling safe are two different things. So that psychological safety is very important for all security executives to make sure that we're putting programs in place where our employees can see, feel, and touch and feel that sense of belonging and, that duty of care that we all know is required.
Well, mentioning feeling safe, there were, and there are, I should say, a lot of employees in New York at the Modern Museum of Art who don't feel safe right now because of an incident that happened over the weekend. I don't know if you guys saw this, but we're going to play a clip. It seemed to be a normal afternoon when a disgruntled employee came in, and then very bad things started happening. Let's go ahead and take a look at this video, and then we'll discuss it on the other side.
Back to that new video of a stabbing, in fact, 2 of them inside the Museum of Modern Art. Police are still trying to track down the man who stabbed 2 employees yesterday, but they say they know who he is. The museum is closed today as the investigation continues. Eyewitness News reporter Shantae Lance live at MoMA with the new information just coming in. Shantae, good morning.
Michelle, good morning. It was a chaotic scene at this world-renowned museum yesterday. This morning, police released new video of that stabbing. I want to get you straight to it. It's surveillance video from inside the museum. You can see the suspect walk inside the museum, hop over the front desk, and then start to attack those 2 employees. Now, we stopped the video just before you actually see him stab the first employee. 2 of them were stabbed in their back, neck, and collarbone. The good news this morning, they're expected to survive. Police have identified that man as 60-year-old Gary Cabana. The Museum of Modern Art is considered one of the largest and most influential museums of modern art in the world. Police say Cabana was a regular at this museum, but because of 2 previous disorderly conduct incidents, his membership was revoked on Friday. But when he tried to get inside yesterday afternoon, he turned violent. Museum goers watched in horror.
They started shouting, get out for your own safety.
We just saw a commotion, people running down the escalator, down the stairs.
I know everybody's scared. Wait a minute. Wait. Just wait.
It was nerve-wracking, really. I was trying to keep myself calm for my daughter.
Okay, so this incident just happened over the weekend. And, again, the Museum of Modern Art in New York is supposed to be a very calm place where people come and appreciate art. So it's one of the last places you think that something like this would happen. But, there were a few clues in there. If you listen closely to the report, he had been acting unruly in the past, and his membership was revoked on Friday. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. Sure. If you were advising the Museum of Modern Art, do you have a list of people that you look out for in their pictures and not to let them in? Or how do you deal with disgruntled employees who are now coming back in? And whoever would like to start.
I'll take a shot at that. I think just from a 30,000 foot perspective, we're all human and nobody's exempt from being in a mental health crisis. I think what we need to look for primarily are changes in behavior over time. If somebody all of a sudden starts acting differently, they're withdrawn, they're much more aggressive in their behavior. We need to look and see why is that, and if we can have a dialogue with the person, then maybe we can be in a position to help them. If not, then I think we have a duty, if we work with somebody, to be able to look out not only for them but for others in the workplace. And if they're making threats or alluding to things that appear to be troubling, the old adage, if you see something, say something. In the case, if you hear something or become aware of something, talk to someone about it. Don't keep it to yourself. Too often we always, hear after the fact, it was only a matter of time before that person did whatever it is. Let's not wait to hear that. Let's do something and prevent it from happening.
Yeah, I think Jim raises a good point. You don't know what other people are going through. Something could trigger them and then they just snap. And, it happens to lots of people. Yeah. So if you were advising the Museum of Modern Art, they're closed down for a couple of days now because they have to see how they're going to deal with this. Steve, let me ask you, what advice would you give them so that when employees do come back in the building, they feel safe? I mean, those two employees got stabbed.
Yeah, I think, there was a point before COVID that in most companies, they made a reasonable effort for access control, right? I mean, now access control is digital and physical, but let's go back to MoMA for a moment. I think what they could do is create a safe zone or a buffer so that they have an ability to just kind of pre-screen guests. But, Jim knows, Brad knows, everybody knows that, you can have keep outs. At one time at Sony, just in our studio, we had 80 keep outs. That's not manageable. Nobody has enough hours in the day to say, oh, here comes Joe, he might be a risk. And then what are you going to do about it? So creating the buffer and a protection zone, if you will, educating the workforce. But here's another one. Expect the unexpected, even the unthinkable. I mean, 3 weeks ago, what Russia's done was unthinkable. Even though it appeared they were going to, nobody believed they were or would. So those are just some quick thoughts, and let me defer to my guests or my partners here.
I think the other great thing was that they had restricted his admittance through good threat management processes. So the other thing that becomes apparent is that in environments like this, and many of the facilities in New York have really strong visitor access management and even screening for passive weapons and the like. So I think those are also things that we might advise them to do moving forward.
And Florence, yeah, what message do you send as a company to your employees to let them know, hey, you know what? We're gonna take care of this. We got this, and we're gonna do our best to make sure that you're safe and this doesn't happen again.
Yeah, I'm going to assume that MoMA had some thoughtful security plans in place. But you can't prevent every bad incident, but you certainly should plan the best you can. Otherwise, you can have legal action taken against you by others and even your employees for not keeping them safe or not having a plan. There could be reputational damage to the brand and just potentially create anxiety and fear amongst your employees if the company doesn't have a good plan to keep everyone safe. But not every organization has the resources like MoMA and some of these Fortune 500 companies. So for smaller organizations, if you're thinking, what can I do as a leader in my company to keep my employees safe? I think establishing partnerships with security-related stakeholders is key, because they will serve as force multipliers for you if you don't have the resources to build a robust corporate security team. So stakeholders like your police department and industry associations related to security. There are a lot of them out there. You just have to dig for them.
Yeah, somebody said relationships before. Was it you, Jim?
Yeah.
And I think that's the key, companies having relationships with different law enforcement entities and security agencies, and it's going to take a village to solve the problem, right? All right. I want everybody to stand by. We are going to go to another break. It is so good to have you all with us. And in our audience, let me remind you, whether you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, to get some questions ready and write us your questions. We have the greatest security experts here, so let's pick their brains. All right, let's go to the break and we'll be right back. And we're back. Okay, so we're waiting for our audience to write in some questions, but in the meantime, let me ask you, just picking up on that last segment about partnering with law enforcement agencies and, you know, really creating new relationships that help everybody feel safe. Brad, let me ask you, does the FBI have any department that reaches out and deals with companies, private companies, to help them with security?
Yes, Anita. I think, as Jim said, local law enforcement is usually the first responder, and it's often there. But the FBI actually has a formal program. The office I was involved with, Office of Private Sector, set up in every field office a coordinator that works with businesses. You may not see a business as having an FBI issue, but to use the phrase relationship, it is good to reach out to the office to build that relationship. You might find they actually have resources, could be related to cyber, white collar crime. They have a civil rights division that deals with hate crimes related to some of the issues today. And it's building those relationships ahead of time so they get to know who you are and what resources they might be able to provide. Plus, the FBI can often be a bridge to other agencies in federal government, DHS or others. Again, I'll emphasize local law enforcement is first responders, but there's definitely a force multiplier, to use Florence's term, with the FBI.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, you know, a lot of people might not know that the FBI has a department that engages with the private sector. So that's really good information for people to know that. And Jim, you spent so many years in local law enforcement. How does local law enforcement step in and help private companies in cases where they need their employees to feel safe, especially like right now?
Yeah, you know, local law enforcement is broken down generally in every department. And keep in mind, there's 18,000 police departments across the nation. And so they all do things a little bit differently. But most departments are broken down geographically. So you have sectors or basic car areas locally. And each one of those has an officer who is kind of the quarterback, if you will, for that piece of real estate. They get to know over time in the tenets of community policing. They get to know the individuals who have businesses in the community, the various residents throughout the community, and they're the point of contact when you have an issue to reach out to them, and then they will coordinate the service delivery throughout the process. Likewise, the departments are also broken down by specialty. So detectives who do the follow-up to any crime report that's taken are broken down: homicide, robbery, burglary, and now organized retail theft, particularly in the case of our businesses and where we've seen so many of these organized smash and grab type of events. There are sections of the police department that specialize in this and work closely with other police departments in the area. So if you have an issue and it's something particularly that's repeated, don't keep it to yourself. Reach out to the department, and if your local department doesn't have it, there may be something regionally that will address your issues. So again, relationships are everything, and you won't know about these things unless you ask and reach out to people.
Yes, very true.
Anita,
Florence, did you want to say something? Go ahead.
You know, I can share a couple examples for those watching. You know, most police departments have a crime prevention unit or other unit that works with the business community, and the officers can conduct security assessments of your property, advise on safety and security protocols, give presentations to employees on how to respond to an active shooter situation, perhaps at an all hands, staff meeting that you might have annually. I've seen all of these taken place, and all it takes is for a company executive to reach out to their local police department and invite them in. So this is a resource that we can all tap into.
You know, just to add one more thought to this.
Yeah, please.
I mean, we could talk for hours, but I'll throw this out. I think that today, it doesn't matter what size your business is, there has to be a culture of security built into the company.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody, I don't care, it doesn't have to be an expert. They don't have to work 80 hours a week to do it. But somebody should own the responsibility for security and safety, really, to do what we just said, create that assurance that we're doing the right thing on behalf of our workforce. But it doesn't just happen. You got to create the culture. Law enforcement can help you do that. Private sector can help you do that. but don't ignore it. There's too much going on today that, we don't want to be the deer in headlights.
Yeah, that's so true. It's all about being prepared. So we do have a question from our audience, and this comes from Greg Hayward, and he wants to know, how dependent are all of these efforts on AI applications? So artificial intelligence, how does that play into any of this? And who would like to start?
I think I'll jump on it just to start it off. I think technology is something that is a great assist to being able to investigate crimes, prevent crimes, limit access, those type of things. But when it comes right down to it, it's somebody being aware of what's going on. They're aware for their own purposes when they're walking to a garage, they're in a business, they're walking into a public space. Aware of options available to them if something bad were to happen. And that could be an earthquake, or it could be a fire, or it could be a shooting. But have an idea of what they're going to do, and not only where the exit is, but where multiple exits are, so that they have an option to be able to escape from the area. Likewise, I think that, we tend to think that everything can be resolved with technology. We need more technology, and it is helpful in many cases. But when it comes right down to it, it's the individual who's taken it, and as Steve mentioned, internalizing for yourself as part of your culture the need for us all to be risk managers and to work and look out for each other as well as ourselves.
Really good points, Jim. Appreciate that. We have
with
another
AI,
question. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
From a digital standpoint, or cyber, if you will, the bad guys are learning AI, and they are going to AI. And what they're going to do with ransomware type attacks and other types of breaches and attempts is they're going to automate it all. And so on the other end, the good guys, if they have some guy sitting at a computer screen watching 5,000 hits an hour, they can't keep up. So AI is our friend, AI is our enemy. Can't ignore it.
Yeah, especially with all of the, the cyber threats out there today. We have a question from LinkedIn, and someone is asking about how do these best places to work ratings, how do these impact how people feel about maybe working for a particular company or continuing to work at a particular company? Are those things relevant? Brad, you want to take a stab at that?
Yes, very relevant. I'll speak to my days at Target Corporation.
Yeah.
We did surveys, both guests and team members, the employee base, on a regular basis, and solicited that feedback with, again, our focus on keeping a safe working shopping environment. That type of feedback helped us develop measures to improve ourselves, to help with guests, help with team members. And it did feed into the broader surveys as best places to work. If people felt they were at risk, they expressed that. It's a very basic Maslow hierarchy need. And that has an impact on a whole organization, on a culture. And it definitely is part of it. Not all of it, but it's part of it. And it actually, when you have an incident like we've shown tonight, changes things dramatically in an organization. So it's not only the moment it happens and what you've done up to that point, but what do you do afterwards? What are the continuing follow-up pieces with the employees, with the staff, the guests, all that? And I think, again, not to talk, the more you can plan for this, the more you plan for the event. In federal government or law enforcement, it's called left of boom. The idea that you try to prevent it from going off, but you also have to plan for what happens when boom happens.
Yeah.
I think that's what people look for. That's what they respond to.
Speaking of planning for things that don't necessarily go how you plan. So we're all here tonight because people are about to go back to the workplace. The pandemic has, it's weaker now, it's tamped down, and people are, the mask mandates are going away, less people are getting sick, and people are going back into the office. So what happens, and do you think companies are prepared if this all changes and another variant comes into play, mask mandates come back, more COVID restrictions. Maybe you got to now show your vaccine card. Maybe there's employees that didn't want to get a vaccine. And now you have to deal with this letdown. Do you think companies are prepared for that? And let me start with you, Brad. Go ahead.
I think they're getting prepared in the sense that, and I think Steve said it earlier, there's a lot of unknowns or uncertainty, but the upside to this is there's also been a lot of learning over the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
People have seen behaviors, have seen how to address those. And so I think the companies I talk with are in a much better place, not knowing which way it's going to turn, but they're much better prepared.
Matt, you work in healthcare, and this is all about people's health. And if all of a sudden, people are now coming back, they don't have to have masks, we're a little bit more relaxed. But if a new variant comes into play and all of a sudden people have to mask up again, how does that impact a company's success?
Right. Well, if nothing else, what we've seen is we saw companies very quickly pivot from full-scale operations to minimize operations on site in their physical location. So we know, and they know, that they can do this. I think what changes is, as discussed earlier, we know that people have been tense, things are a little bit on edge, more rules, more policies, more practices. If we pivot back to the same area, I think we'll also be prepared, knowing what happened the last time, to hopefully put better security plans in place to be able to deal with what we know is going to be a part and parcel of all those new rules and new policies. So we've been there, done that. This time, hopefully, we're all better prepared, and we can minimize the risk to our staff and the safety to our environments.
Yeah, but you can never really plan for how someone would react to that. There are so many people who never believed in wearing a mask, but they wore one because they had to, or they got a vaccine because they wanted to stay working, or they wanted to be included with their friends. And so now, if we go back to the workplace and then we have to reinstitute all these rules, you're going to have a lot of people who are very upset. Florence, what would you tell companies who might be in that position? I mean, they have to prepare for this because, we just don't know what's down the line.
Right. So unpredictable. We're going down one path and then we can be making a 180. I would say, for companies, Brad had mentioned that we have learned a lot over the years. And I think it'll be good for companies to reach out to other companies. To benchmark what others are doing and learn from the collective wisdom of organizations that have struggled for years, trying to figure out how to respond, what to do, what policies to put into place. So as an organization, especially if you're a mid-cap company, and you don't have that big corporate security team in-house, you can reach out to other companies and have those conversations. And again, I talked about relationships and networking. There are those security networks available out there where they're talking about this very subject. And it's all happening out there. I would encourage all the companies and anyone who's watching who leads an organization to try to tap into that.
So, but be ready to pivot, right?
Yeah.
You got to be ready to pivot.
If I could just to add on to that one, I think a couple of things, just adaptability, being flexible, being able to roll with whatever comes your way, but also communication skills. I think a lot of the frustration we saw, other than the fatigue from just this going on for so long, was inconsistent messaging and hearing one thing from one place and something else from something else, some very diametrically opposed to each other. For within the work environment, at least, to be able to share consistent messages, to be able to provide all of the information that we can and that we have, and to be able to have a dialogue with the people that we have the privilege to work with in a way where everybody feels like they're part of the equation. And that if you come away from there, whatever the decision was, that everybody felt like they had some input into it. And then I think, again, going back to the adaptability piece, allowing people to be able to deal with this as they need to, being sensitive to mental health issues, but also providing for the people who don't feel comfortable in the workplace to be able to work remotely if your business allows for that.
But that's a good point. But, there are some businesses where you think people really do need to be in person. Steve, you worked for Sony Pictures. That's a very creative environment. And then you had people working at home and they were kind of isolated. But, entertainment is collaborative. It's very exciting. You think that people would thrive off of each other and look forward to going back to work. But do you think that's the case? Do you think people are looking forward to going back to work? Or do you think they have some great hesitation and maybe got used to working at home?
Yeah, really good point. I think for some, when the employer says to you, it's time to come back to work, to the workplace, the question is why? Yeah. I've been doing this for 18 months or whatever it is, and I work from home and I do my job. Why do I have to come back? So there's that element. And I think, was it Brad or Jim or Matt? I don't know who said it, but, being flexible, accommodating, listening to what those needs are. People have all kinds of other issues they've got to deal with, childcare, whatever it may be, someone ill in the family, whatever. And I think, where you say one size fits all anymore, it does not. So be open about that. But again, coming back to the workplace, maybe you start off with, more of a hybrid model and see how it goes. I think that's, a good compromise. I'll say it that way.
Kind of ease people back in.
Yeah.
And,
then
Matt,
I'm sorry, on your point about what if it comes back, I think we're going to, Matt said it, we're ready. We're much more ready than ever before. We know what we need to do pretty much. People won't like it, but okay. But I think where the line is going to be drawn this time is we're not going to put people out of business. We're not going to mandate close your door. We're going to mandate, here's good practices, enforce those, and we'll compromise.
Well, that's maybe half the battle, that employees could go into their work environment knowing that companies know how to do this now, and they're not going to shut down. They've got the tools to handle this, and it's proven. They've proven it over the past couple of years. But now the employers want you back in the building. And Matt, you work in a healthcare environment. I would imagine in your environment too, people want to come back and be with people in the room and see them and, hear their concerns in person. Am I right about that?
Well, I can say for my employer specifically, there is a large culture that says that there is some magic around being in the environment and seeing all those patients and seeing what they're going through each and every day and their families and being connected to the mission. So I think what we've seen in healthcare and throughout the country, I talked to my colleagues, is that people in healthcare, if they're sent home, in many cases, they don't feel as connected to the mission of the organization in healthcare as they once did. So you're taking positions and you're telling people to go do it off site, which has its advantages. But I think a lot of people in healthcare really want to feel connected to the people and the patients and the visitors.
No question about that. And I'd like to just go around to each of you and maybe get just a quick thought from each of you about what you would tell employees about coming back into the workplace and why they should want to come back, why they should feel safe, and why, this is the goal. The goal is to get back in the building. And Matt, I'll start with you.
Well, I would just remind employees that they're a part of the solution and that we need all eyes, all ears on deck, not just before, not just now, but all the time.
Okay, very good. Jim, what would you tell employees who are, maybe a little nervous about coming back?
Yeah, I think it's all about rebuilding the team. We're all in this together. We all have a goal to make the company successful, and by virtue of that, make each and every one of you successful as well. But we can only do that if we work together. So collaboration, communication, and being able to work in that team spirit.
Great points. What about you, Florence?
I would say for employees, have a conversation with your organization's leaders about the safety and security measures that they are putting into place. If you're going back, you want to know for sure that the leaders have thought about security, safety, and the well-being of their employees. And let's not just assume, right? I think we can just assume and say, of course they'll do it. That's not really the case. And so I would urge employees to ask that pointed, specific question: what are the different security and safety measures being put into place so we can feel safe going back to work? Because I feel really safe at home. How do you convince me to come into that office? Right?
Yeah, you want to feel the same way in the office. Steve, go ahead and give me your advice that you would offer to employees coming back to work.
Well, one for employees and one for employers. For employees, don't be shy. If you're concerned about something, find a way to express that concern and get it resolved. For employers, you know what? Town hall meetings work great, but you have to be open and allow people to say what's on their mind. And then from that, figure out the best solutions.
Okay, excellent. All good points. And Brad, we'll finish with you.
Well, I think I would echo almost everybody's comments to date. I think communication is key in both directions, but also there is a sense of mission, purpose, being back together that you get by being with people. I mean, I'm still enjoy having a cup of coffee or breaking bread, sitting across from somebody, not an electronic environment. And I think that's what makes an organization, a company, what it is, its value.
I think that's so true. And, I think people have maybe forgotten that about the camaraderie, about bumping into someone in the hallway and laughing about something, gathering around the water cooler, as they might say. I mean, those are all the fun, great things about work. And if we can create an environment where people feel safe doing all the things they used to do, I think they'll come back in droves, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And I think, you guys make a great team, and I would feel comfortable working in any of your organizations, just so you know.
Thank you, Anita.
Thank you.
Thank you.
To recap, I want to leave our audience with the 3 points that I think we hit upon the most. And I think number one is relationships, whether that's with your employer, with your coworkers, with law enforcement, whoever it is, relationships are the key to making this successful. So that's the first point. The second point is organizations out there, they really need to be ready to pivot, because even though everything looks good with COVID winding down, we don't know what could happen. I just heard on the news the other day, there are still cities in China that are locking down, and they're having a little bit of a problem over there. So hopefully they can get that under control, and hopefully no new variants come here and disturb what everybody is, trying to do, the goal of getting back to work. And then the third one, which I think is really interesting, is to reach out to law enforcement agencies like the FBI and your local police departments and see what tools are available for private businesses, because there are some, and maybe employers don't know about that, or maybe employees don't know about that. And that's something that I would imagine makes everybody feel safe, knowing that your company has a good relationship with the FBI and local police. That can only be a good thing. So, all right, panel, I want to thank you so much. This has been really interesting, and I hope great information for our audience. So thank you to Steve Bernard, Brad Brecky, Florence Chung, Matt Horace, and Jim McDonald. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, Anita.
That is a wrap. Oh, yes, Matt, did you want to say something?
Good night.
You were raising your hand. Okay. Be sure to join us the third Tuesday of every month for another exciting edition of Live at 5. You never know what we're going to talk about next. I'm Anita Vogel. Everyone, have a great night.
Thank you.